Before embarking on a study of the famous Katha Upanishad, let me tell something specific about this book and something in general about the Upanishads. Katha Upanishad is probably the most studied and discussed Upanishads of the Vedas. People, by and large, understand that the Katha Upanishad is simply a story of two great characters, Nachiketa and Yama. Some view that a philosophy is added to it to make it an Upanishad. The agnostics, research scholars, and people with a critical mindset are speculative about this wonderful book. They are of the opinion that the narrative lacks historicity. Western scholars, bearing a few, squarely blame anything and everything that is Indian to be non-historical. They question historicity of every Indian legacy. That has been their temperament from centuries. Every student studies history from an objective point of view. Beyond that, history is considered meaningless. But history as a subject by itself is highly debatable. What is meant by history? Who decides about someone's history? And what are the events needed to be put down to make things look historical? Who decides what are the important things historically, either from an individual or from a group's perspective? These are the questions we should ask about history. Most historians of the 20th century are typically Semitic in their approach. To them, history begins with the Old Testament. Even when scientific research collide with their views, they stuck to their conclusions that there can be no history beyond 3,500 years. On the other hand, India accepts existence of the universe right from the Big Bang moment, because our Sankhya system of philosophy, through its theory of cosmology, has long ago implanted it in our culture. We can believe and accept every theory under the sun without spicing it with the salt of history. To this effect, one of the modern writers, Mr. Ian Whitehead, in his famous book Adventure of Ideas, refers about the attitude of the historians' deceit and treachery, that the notions of historians of history, devoid of aesthetic prejudice, devoid of any reliance on metaphysical principles and cosmological generalization, is mostly a figment of their imagination. That is his words. Again, our attitude of critical thinking cannot give us the right understanding of Upanishadic ideas. Even a great scholar like Mr. Max Muller could not understand the essential meaning of the Vedas until he set aside his critical thinking. We come across an interesting historical reference in one of the other important Upanishads, the Taittiriya, about Nachiketa. It says, Nachiketa was a Vidyakama. A Vidyakama is a seeker of knowledge. The Upanishad says that he was very successful in quenching his thirst for knowledge. Remember, this is the conclusion of an Upanishad about the story of Nachiketa. Beyond the historicity and other related issues, what we need to imbibe from the Katha Upanishad is the profundity of the character of Nachiketa. We should not bother about the historicity of Nachiketa as a person, not bother about where he was born and when did he go to Yama's abode, not be worried about how could he return from the Mrityu-loka, the world beyond death. Also, not be concerned about whether Yama is a frictional or factual character. From the modern historical perspective, people are skeptical about what is spoken about in the Upanishads. Many cannot understand the import of the Upanishads because they cannot assimilate their core spiritual culture. As students, we need to have an open mind when we approach the Upanishads. We need to understand the Upanishadic contents as they are explained there, as the Upanishads themselves explain things. As seekers of spiritual truth, let us try to assimilate Nachiketa's passionate desire of gaining knowledge or vidya from the master mind like that of Yama. Try to imbibe his faith or shraddha on the spiritual content that the Upanishad speaks about. Be astounded on his austerity or tapas. Be astonished on his resolve or nishtha, on his spiritual or adhyatmic wisdom, and beyond all, be bewildered on his realizations or anubhutis. These are the things we should grab from every Upanishadic narrative. Such an approach is very specific to our Indian mind because we believe that in life there is nothing greater than gaining spiritual experience. First of all, while approaching the Upanishads, we should have the humility to respect the essential meaning of the Vedas. We must also be prepared to accept the language and the science of the Vedas. We should be aware that the Vedic historical concepts and its aesthetic sense belongs to an era unthinkable to any ordinary human mind.